Welcome to the Just the Disc podcast. My name is Brian. We talk about Blu-rays here, and I am very happy to have Mr. Justin LaLiberty joining me today to talk about Vinegar Syndrome and partner labels and the halfway sale. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on, sir. So let's talk about this. Is going to be, I guess, old news for people who are really keeping up with stuff, but I really want to kind of remind people how exciting the Black Friday or halfway to Black Friday packages. So you just want to talk about the new titles that have already been announced? Obviously, nothing that we don't know already know about, but like what is potentially coming, not the titles, but like what we know and what we still don't know, I guess, is what I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is aware of Thriller by now. Of course, we're doing this kind of massive authorized, edition of Thriller, and it's got They Call Her One Eye. It's got Thriller. It's got footage people haven't seen.
Nice.
Ton of new supplements. It's UHD. It's beautiful. Everything about this package is incredible. So anybody who is a fan of Thriller, which I know there's tons and tons of Thriller fans out there, and anyone who's never seen it before, I mean, they're all equally in for a treat. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the big kind of like grail, release for this package and this sale. And then after that, we've got Miami Connection in UHD, which also includes a cut that hasn't been around. So that's really exciting, and tons of supplements on that too. One of my favorite '80s movies is Cloak and Dagger.
Oh man,
I adore it.
me too.
So it's I think there's kind of a tendency from certain people who see like, oh, it's this PG '80s movie with like a child actor, and they just assume it's going to be like kind of like a Spielbergian type of thing that's a little bit more feel good, but it's a really dark, gritty kids movie, if you can even really call it a kids movie. And the talent of the people involved in this film is like a really big deal for kind of genre pedigree, but it's also just mean as shit. Like it's watching this movie again, I contributed the essay in the booklet for the release, and I had to watch it like a few times, and I
Oh
was like
wow.
shocked at how grim and just unrelenting like the violence targeted at children is in that movie. So
Yeah.
I think people that are a little on the fence or skeptical about this kind of like PG, seemingly like children's film nostalgia movie, I think they're going to be shocked at kind of how like not only grim and violent it is, but how like assured of a genre movie it actually ends up being.
Yeah, no, you talked about the talent behind it. We got Tom Holland on the script. We've got Richard Franklin on the directing, one of the great Hitchcock not protege, but like a guy who knew Hitchcock and brought him to lectures in Australia and stuff, and just really made his his filmmaking style not on the back of Hitchcock, because I feel like he does his own thing. But yeah, that movie to me is the epitome of the dark 80s PG movie where you've got and there's and it's got like a sadness to it. Then I don't want to put people off with that, but like the emotion that's there, I think runs a lot deeper, and that really makes the stakes and the whole thing that much more engaging for me. It's truly a favorite. And when you guys announced it, I was over the moon. I was absolutely floored and so excited. And the fact that it's not only Blu-ray but UHD is just blown my mind. And these features look amazing. You've got a commentary with Joe Lynch and Tom Holland, and Joe has told me that like it's like he goes deep, like he goes deep on the commentary, and I can't wait to hear that. Like he's just like, it sounds like a pull no punches kind of commentary, and I'm like, okay, that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I'm stoked for it. I think this whole lineup is super solid, but if I had to pick one that I'm like, personally the most excited about, it's Cloak and Dagger. And I
Oh,
feel,
that's awesome.
I almost feel weird because, like, of course, my bread and butter is like, these exploitation films and, just kind of wild genre films. So Thriller and Miami Connection, they're both great and I love them dearly. But Cloak and Dagger just really like kind of touches me in a place where it brings back like all these memories of just kind of growing up and learning to appreciate genre film. So I think
Yeah.
it's the type of thing that's like for our fans or parents who are just like, I really want to show my kids your movies, but it's kind of fucked up to just put on the Candy Snatchers, like for family movie night. Like you can put on Cloak and Dagger, and like it definitely goes. I think it goes beyond what a PG would be now. I think it's more of like a PG-13, and like there's some things in there that are like, holy shit, this could probably be an R rating.
Yeah.
But it's the type of thing where it's a good like gateway movie for people who want to like expose their children to kind of like the darker side of cinema. And I think it's just all around, even outside of all of those things, just like a great movie.
Yeah,
So
truly.
I'm very excited for people to kind of see it for the first time who haven't. The other confirmed release is the Return of Our Drive-In collection, which is Horror High and Stanley. Horror High is, you know, like this uncut version that people haven't really seen, and then Stanley is a movie I'm never ever in my life going to watch. I like to pride myself on having seen, you know, everything we ever put out, but I am mortified of snakes, so I will never in a million years watch Stanley. So I can't talk about it. It has snakes in it, so if you're into that thing, by all means. But I will. It'll sit on my shelf and never be watched.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, that's actually a good sell, I think, ultimately, because like the snake side of it, I have seen it, and I do think it's really interesting, and I'm very excited to see you guys' version of it. I don't know too much about Hell High, although I've heard it talked about for years. Are you a fan? You're a fan of that one, or how do you feel about that one?
Well, I've only ever so I haven't watched, you know, the uncut version we're putting out yet. I've
Oh, that's
only ever
cool.
seen kind of the version that's been circulating, you know, kind of on video, and mostly in like pretty bad versions. So I'm really curious to see kind of how it is with like the added gore and, you know, just kind of seeing it cleaned up. So I do like the version that I've seen, but I think this version's going to kind of blow that away.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. So those are the announced. Now, what are the holes? Not what the titles, but like what else do we have coming that's going to be a surprise?
We have two more surprise Vinegar Syndrome releases and then two VSA releases.
Wow, two VSAs. That's fantastic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so there's a lot of a lot of stuff, and then, you know, of course we're gonna have like catalog slipcovers and a ton of merch. So there's all sorts of things coming up on Friday for everybody.
Yeah, I'm so glad we could have this conversation before the sale. That was our goal, was to be like, okay, let's talk before this happens, because I know a lot of people, they just don't buy except for the sale. Like that's their time. And so they're waiting 6 months at a time to see like, okay, what should I get? You know, and I get a lot of people asking, you know, like, what do you recommend? And then so I think we've been making it pretty clear, or you guys have made it clear. It's like February releases and back, right? Is that about where we're at? Something like that?
It's anything prior to February. So
Prior to,
February
okay,
releases are not included in this.
good to know.
It's
Good to
prior,
know.
so January, and then,
January
you
and
know,
back.
everything that came prior to that as well.
And that obviously applies to partner label releases as well as Vinegar Syndrome.
Yeah,
That's
except
awesome.
the only caveat there, the kind of weird thing is, except for partner label releases that weren't originally under OCN. So,
Ah,
you know, like the original AGFA releases or the original Altered Innocence releases, like those were not under our relationship. So those are handled technically by a different distributor. So we
yeah,
can't discount those. Those are not applicable. But everything else, anything that OCN distributed, 100%, you know, that'll be on sale just like anything else.
that's great. And that's a good little note to add so people don't get disappointed and they can't get old AGFA titles. But that said, that's a whole lot of real estate right there, you know,
It's
but
a lot.
you know,
Especially
so
with the recent partner label schedules. You know, you're looking, the Vinegar Syndrome releases in a month. You know, you might have like 4 or 5, you know, maybe 6 or something in a busy month. But with the partner labels right now, it's like a dozen a month, kind of as the rule. So, you know, when you add all that up, I mean, you're looking at a lot of releases over the past year, even just since the last sale, that are now eligible to be on sale. So there's a lot for people to kind of go through.
well, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. You know, I love getting your recommendations, because for me, like, you pull out stuff that I maybe wasn't thinking about, especially on both the Vinegar side and the partner side. So if you have some stuff that you want to highlight, we can start with Vinegar Syndrome titles, you know, going all the way back. And then if there's, I think the other thing people always want to know is what's the new stuff? What's the stuff between the last sale and January that I should be, you know, getting? If you recommend any favorites you want, but like if there's any that are in that sweet spot of stuff that people haven't got since the last sale, let's start with those, and then general Vinegar Syndrome Rex, and then maybe some partner label Rex if you have them, because you know this stuff better than your average person by far. So
Yeah, I
whatever.
mean, I'm actually just gonna focus on stuff that hasn't been on sale before
Oh,
because
perfect.
I've done so many of these and
No,
just
you're
like
right.
online. So I mean, everybody knows that I'm gonna like talk at length about the Jamal Fanaka movies. So if you haven't gotten those, you know, pick up Welcome Home, Brother Charles, and MMA, the penitentiary movies. Woman's Torment is one I always go to.
Yeah.
Shot is one I like a lot.
Me
Night
too.
Owl.
Shot is huge for
Yeah.
me. It's one of my absolute big recommends.
It's so good, and there's a bunch of those that I'll always kind of hype. Like The Killing Kind is another one. But if anybody is looking for kind of the deep catalog ones, there's plenty of lists out there that I've generated either through my Twitter account or these past versions of this podcast. So
Yeah, you've done a bunch here.
tons of those, tons of those out there. So I'm just gonna focus on the newer stuff, and
Great.
I have a bunch. So I've
Let's
got
do it. That's awesome.
coming out of Black Friday last year, we had a movie that I love that's, it came from MGM, and it's a really batshit genre hybrid. It's like a sci-fi revenge movie called Steel and Lace.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's pretty nuts. It's kind of like a cyber thriller rape revenge movie. And that just in a nutshell is like something that I'm immediately intrigued by. I really love like kind of 80s and 90s sort of cyber thrillers, anything that involves, I guess, robots, androids, any kind of just like exploitation of technology for different purpose than it probably was intended for. So homicidal androids are of immediate interest to me. And when you kind of put that into like a rape revenge story, that's something that we've never really seen before, or at least haven't seen much of. So yeah, Steel and Lace is a movie that I really appreciate and I think is kind of under discussed. I don't think it's a movie that people really knew much about until we released it, and even then, I feel like it didn't really get the buzz it deserved, just because it was something that people hadn't really heard much about. And I think it's one that I really like strongly recommend. I think it does interesting things with genre, and it just has like a pretty mean sensibility to it, but it's also it's not like too grim. It's not the kind of thing that you like put on and then feel like you need to take a shower. It's definitely like a fun movie, like the kind of thing you can watch with a group of people and not feel embarrassed by showing your friends some of the stuff that you're into. But yeah, I really love Steel and Lace. And then spinning off of that, kind of going also from Black Friday, but a similar kind of sci-fi cyber thriller type of thing, is a movie called TC 2000 that we did as VSA, and that's Billy Blank's sci-fi movie from the 90s. It's got a lot of fighting in it. It's got some really great action scenes, and it's just another one of these sort of kind of modestly budgeted cyber action movies. And that's something I've just like always had a liking for, where it's these people making what appears to be a high concept sci-fi movie. You have like in the 90s, you had these movies like Johnny Mnemonic and Virtuosity, and then of course the later you get things like The Matrix or The 13th Floor. These big studio productions that they're spending like tens of millions of dollars on, maybe even $100 million on. And then you have these people that are just like doing it on a shoestring. And you get movies like TC 2000, and it's just like that idea, like movies like Cyborg Cop or like The Digital Man. Like there's all these kinds of like direct to video, like sci-fi cyber movies from the 90s that I really love, and I think TC 2000 is one of the best ones.
Very nice.
Yeah, highly recommend that. Another VSA release that we did last year is this movie called The Grave. Did you watch that one yet?
I didn't get a chance. I have it, but I didn't get a chance to watch it yet. So this is great.
It's wild. It's just one of those like 90s kind of post Tarantino like kitchen sink thrillers.
Oh.
So it's got like a wild cast. It's like a really good ensemble cast, but the fun thing about it is it's almost set up kind of like a Tales from the Crypt episode.
Oh,
You've got this kind of like strange gothic bent to it, and it has like these bookends where like this story is being told, and then it ends up being this kind of like Southern Gothic sort of crime story. There's not a lot out there like it. I think it's a really interesting blend of kind of like that hyper cool crime cinema that came out, after Tarantino made a splash in the 90s. You had movies like Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, or 2 Days in the Valley, like kind of all of these, really weird, quirky sort of crime movies. And then there's The Grave, and it's almost like it has a dark comic edge to it, but it also does feel a little bit more like sturdy and like stoic at times, and like it's telling this kind of almost theatrical story. So I think it kind of got like written off or just didn't really get a lot of attention in the 90s, but I think it's really great. I think it's not only great at like the genre it's existing in at that time and space, but also just transgressing the boundaries of that. So it's something nobody would really expect. And I think it's like a really really genuinely great and exciting movie where you don't know what's coming, and the cast all give it their best. So highly recommended to fans of like 90s crime or just under the radar crime films.
Awesome. I'm glad I have this one. I can watch it like soon. That's amazing.
You should definitely do that.
Nice.
And then for the horror fans, a movie I love that we put out last year is called The Laughing Dead. And that's another, you talk about like a kitchen sink genre movie, and The Laughing Dead is just like every crazy horror thing you can imagine in a movie, including, like just severed heads and demons. And it's just, it's really everything. It's like a bunch of different horror subgenres, like all put in a blender and then turned into a movie that shockingly works. Because a lot of times people try and do something like that, and then you can only do like one of those things really well, or you can maybe do 2 out of 5 well, but The Laughing Dead does all of it well. So I really, really love that. Just that kind of approach to it.
I feel like I've heard Joe Rubin talk about that as a favorite of his too on a podcast somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who have seen it or like have been seeing it for years, kind of prior to our release, have all been really passionate about it. And it's one of those movies that people, the fans of it had really wanted like a solid release to come along for a long time. But the fans of it are definitely a very niche, crowd. So I think a lot of people hadn't heard of it, and now it's out there. It's accessible. It's one of those like it's really gory. It's kind of tongue in cheek. It's just like a really fun. It's like a party horror movie. It's the kind of horror movie when I used to program, kind of marathons of horror movies that people didn't know the titles for. That's like the kind of thing you just drop in there, you end the show with, and like the crowd goes nuts because it's just like nonstop, like off the rails. Yeah, I love it. I think it's to me it's kind of like the closest thing American horror cinema has to a movie like The Seventh Curse.
Okay.
It feels very like kind of those like batshit Hong Kong horror movies, but made for American audiences.
Wow.
So yeah, it just feels like that. Like it's just a go for broke kind of genre oddity that people didn't really know much about. So yeah, I highly recommend that one.
Very cool.
And then speaking of kind of batshit horror oddities, Devil Story. Which...
Oh my god, I haven't even seen this, but I know it by again another one that I have and haven't gotten a chance to watch it, but I know it by reputation. I think Phil Blankenship, mutual friend Phil Blankenship, has talked about this movie for years, and yeah, heard it's just out of its mind.
I don't even know how to explain it. It's the kind of thing like you wanna sell it, and you just like people are like, well, what is it? And it's like I don't fucking know. Like it's there's like there's a guy that like might be a Nazi, and there's like a mummy, and it's hallucinatory. It's just I don't even know. Like I liken it like if you look at kind of these French horror films from like the 70s or 80s, especially ones that are a little bit more like abstract in their approach to their genre sensibilities. You have like movies of like Grapes of Death, which I adore. So there's you kind of have that idea of like you're gonna approach the genre and just like do it in like a really vague way. And Devil Story does that, but it also like dumps on a ton of gore, just like really weird shit. And it's the kind of thing like that was made for a midnight movie crowd. Nice. Like you would just put it on and like melt minds, and it does that, and it just like doesn't stop. And it's like a really quick movie. It's a short runtime, but you've never seen anything like it. Like there's nothing else like that compares, which is either a good thing or a bad thing. I think the reactions to Devil Story have been amusing because it's people get it and they're either like, what the hell is this? Who would want to watch it? Or people are like, this is my new favorite thing. And that's to me my favorite kind of movie or favorite kind of release is a lot of people don't like things that are polarizing. I love things that are polarizing because it means that it's made for a specific mind. There's a very specific thing that filmmaker is doing, and there's a very specific audience that are like on that wavelength. And I think that's a really like special thing because you don't get it often. And Devil Story is like 100% one of those movies where you're either in or you're out, and like whichever one you are, you're like that to a large degree. So yeah, I think it's a hard one to just like blindly recommend because anybody who's taking these recommendations seriously is going to buy it. Like a word of caution, like you might hate this movie and hate me for telling you to watch it, but I love it, and do with that what you will.
Nice.
Next up is another movie I really like called Resurrection. Talking about kind of these 90s movies like we go back to like TC 2000, you're talking about these kind of lower budget movies that are like taking other things that happened kind of within studios and like trying to do them and like almost getting there. Resurrection kind of, it just feels like it absolutely is a lower budget riff on Seven, which, you know,
Oh,
that really needs no introduction. I mean, everybody knows Seven, and it's Christopher Lambert starring version of Seven, super gory. The kills are really really gnarly. Are arguably like much more so than David Fincher's movie, and it's a really like great kind of, you know, procedural. It's got a really good story. The killer is nuts. But yeah, the death scenes are just like next level, you know, gruesome, shocking. The movie's super bleak, which of course Seven is as well. But I think this one, you know, Seven is arguably the better movie, and it's definitely the one people know better. But I think Resurrection like really gives it a sincere try and like succeeds in every respect.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a brutal one.
I mean, you kind of have me at just Christopher Lambert at doing Seven. Like, I'm kind of just there with that, and then beyond that is all gravy. So that's great. And these are all great, Justin. You're doing obviously a wonderful job, because I feel like these are titles that I'm not hearing talked about enough, and you would know too, because you hear a lot of feedback direct from people. And so this is like the perfect list of you know, stuff people should be checking out. I love this stuff. This is great.
Yeah, I have two more. One of those is a movie that I think people do know sort of well, but is Stephanie Rothman's Terminal Island,
Mm,
which we did a UHD for, and
yes.
you know, Stephanie's films are like some of my favorite. Velvet Vampire is like an absolute like gem of a vampire movie, and then you have The Student Nurses is like one of my all-time favorite just exploitation movies in general, or not even just an exploitation movie, just like an American movie about, you know, America and like our political landscape. And then Terminal Island is kind of similar. You know, it's an exploitation movie that also has a lot to say about, you know, our prison system and, you know, the kind of gender dynamics that Stephanie plays with are really exciting. But it's honestly just a good time. You know, Terminal Island is just like a great time at the movies. Seeing that movie in a theater is always awesome. But I think the, you know, the UHD presentation is beautiful. And yeah, it's just a great movie. So hopefully, you know, it's UHD, so the price point's a little higher, which is always nice in these sales. It comes with a Blu-ray, of course, but it's always nice in these sales for people that might have kind of had sticker shock, you know, when it came out, to be able to say, hey, this is more approachable now,
Yeah.
and hopefully, you know, they can kind of take the plunge on it. But Terminal Island, I think, is just like a guaranteed good time. Like, I can't imagine anybody watching that movie and not having a great time with it.
Yeah, yeah, I back you up 100% on this one. Not only do I like the movie a lot and love Stephanie Rothman a lot, I know you're a fan of Group Marriage.
Yep.
She's got at least one more I'm blanking on right now.
Working Girls.
Yes, Working Girls, that's the one. I absolutely love that movie. But yeah, she's just, those are great, like sort of more comedic things, but this is obviously more, I know she doesn't like to call it a women in prison movie, but I feel like it has slight elements of that. And then just like this Lord of the Flies kind of thing, and an incredible cast, including Rodri Mosley, Tom Selleck, you know, and the female cast is incredible too. But that UHD looks ridiculous, just ridiculous. This is a movie that I saw on VHS back in the 90s and was like, this is the way to see this movie, kind of. But now I see it like that, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? This is just gorgeous. It's so beautiful. So I can't back you up enough on that. That's wonderful.
And then my last one is one of my favorite movies of all time, like period. You know, if I had to make like, you know, some top list of movies that I adore that I don't think people talk about enough or talk about in a way that's not fair, is a movie called Tough Guys Don't Dance,
Oh,
which,
very cool.
you know, Norman Mailer, you know, wrote the book, he directed the movie. I mean, everything around this movie is just nuts. It's, you know, it's a canon film. The cast is insane. You've got Wings Hauser, Isabella Rossellini. You know, it's just a insane, like kind of neo noir, like 80s neo noir, Southern Gothic, kind of another like kitchen sink movie. You know, it's really moody. It has a kind of an essence that isn't really matched by anything else that I can think of, which again is probably a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. But I love this movie with like all of my heart. This release was like a real passion project for me. You know, I took care of the supplements on it, and I really wanted to kind of give this movie the treatment I think it's deserved for so long, where it's an actual kind of critical analysis of like what this movie was, like how it came to be, you know, why it exists in any way. Like, why would a studio with financing let Norman Mailer adapt his own book into a movie that is like basically doesn't exist in our plane of existence? It's there's really nothing else like it out there. And yeah, I can't recommend it enough. But again, this kind of falls into the devil story category of like, you might hate this movie, and if you do, you're probably not wrong, because most people would agree with you. I'm definitely in the minority for loving this movie as much as I do, but it's just like it fires on every cylinder for me. It's a weird crime movie. It's got a sharp sense of humor that, you know, may or may not be intentional. I think it's intentional. And then the cast is just wild. Like, I think everybody's giving it their best shot, and there's nothing else that really like looks like it or has the kind of like, you know, very strange like feeling. Like, I don't even know how to explain the feeling of Tough Guys Don't Dance. It feels like you're having a dream where, you know, an old noir film was made by somebody in the 80s who just did like a shitload of coke. And to me, that's something like I want to watch. You know, I kind of live for those like coked up 80s, you know, just sort of like unhinged crime movies. Like Jim McBride's remake of Breathless is like one of my all-time favorite movies. And
Great stuff.
I think this kind of fits into that category of like, there's no other time this movie could have been made than in the 80s, and probably by somebody like Cannon, who just were like, make your movie.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. And I love that your love for it, my friend Elric Kane's love for it. And the fact that it's sort of been reduced in some cases to like one scene, you know, with Ryan O'Neal with one line reading that people think is hilarious, depending on how you look at it, I guess. And that's just a shame, you know, because there's obviously so much more to it than that scene. And I'm really excited that people are championing it, and that you guys did such a great job. And I love that you're putting it out as like, this is one of my favorite movies, like, and people trust you. So like, we're going to have some folks buying this during the sale and checking it out. And that's exciting to me.
It's exciting to me too, but don't blame me. If you guys spend money on this and then you're like, you're insane, like, I'm telling you, I admit it. I know that I might be wrong. But yeah, in my bones, I think this is a legitimately great movie that I think was misunderstood for 30 years. So hopefully other people feel the same way when they take the plunge on it.
That's great. Good stuff. I love these recommendations. That's really wonderful. Would you want to talk about partner labels, partner label month? What's happening in June?
Yeah, so I guess you know, first with the partner labels, let's kind of talk about, you know, the new ones that are going to be on sale. You know, we can't do all of them because it's just so many. I mean,
Yeah.
about, like, you know, well over 100 new partner label releases that would be a part of the sale this time. So what I just want to highlight is, you know, since the last sale happened in November, there's been a bunch of partner labels that either joined like shortly before that or have joined since then, and they've never been involved in the sales before. So I just want to highlight those labels' first releases, just to kind of introduce, you know, those labels again, and just say like, you know, these are their first releases and they're now on sale.
Great.
So I would start with TerrorVision started last September with WNUF Halloween, and you know, it's a very like specific type of movie where if you're nostalgic for, you know, kind of 90s TV or just like Halloween specials in general, I think that's like a really, you know, kind of nostalgic movie, especially to have around the Halloween season. And then we launched Dark Star last fall with a movie called The Last Matinee, which I think is a really great kind of genre throwback. It feels like a movie that, you know, would have existed in the 70s or 80s. It plays a lot with like Giallo elements, and it pretty much all takes place in a movie theater, very similar to a movie like Anguish, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. So I really like The Last Matinee, and also like Anguish, it involves a lot of ocular horror. So if you're at all like, you know, put off by eyes being ripped out, The Last Matinee is probably a great movie for you. Speaking of eyes being ripped out, then we also launched Decanalog last fall with a movie called Keep an Eye Out.
Love it.
Yeah, love that movie. Quentin Dupieux in general, his movies are just wild and wacky. There's nothing else really like them out there. So yeah, that one will be on sale for the first time. We launched Yellow Veil at the same time as catalog with Knocking, which was a great kind of paranoid thriller that hit the festivals last year, and is just a really good, like, it's like very short runtime, just like a quick, doesn't wear out its welcome thriller. um I get really like paranoid about like the idea of someone, being in my walls or being upstairs or something. So I don't know, like that whole idea, especially when, coming out of kind of the pandemic and isolation, like when Knocking came out, I was living in an apartment, and like, we were all like stuck inside. So I would just like hear weird sounds above me and like, what is that? It's like there's somebody up there. Like, so Knocking really kind of hit that home for me. So that'll be on sale for the first time. We launched Connie in December of last year during Partners Only Month, and they're devoted to like bringing out kind of Asian films that are either classic or contemporary. And their first one was this wild Japanese movie called Being Natural. And it's just like, I don't want to ruin anything on that movie, because watching it for the first time is just like a crazy trip. And it's, there's some amazing gore in it. It's just super weird, and it's kind of like a Happiness of the Katakuris type of Japanese movie where you never really know where it's going to go. So yeah, that one, don't want to spoil anything. Go along for the ride. I think it's, something special that you probably haven't seen before. That slipcover glows in the dark, by the way. I haven't really talked much about packaging, but I do love that slipcover glows in the dark. And then in that same month, we launched our relationship with Big World Pictures with Rebels of the Neon God, which is like one of the, kind of the crown jewels of international cinema from that decade. And it's just a beautiful movie. And that slipcover is actually running pretty low, so I think the sale would be a good time to pick that one up. But that's just a great, like legitimately great art house film. And yeah, I think that's the kind of thing that I'm really happy we're bringing into OCN, is having these, kind of art house films existing very much alongside and given the same treatment, as anything else we do. So you have like shot on video horror, and then you have these canonical art house films that are revered, all around the world. So yeah, Rebels of the Neon Gods, really exciting. And then in January, we launched Canadian International Pictures, which is, of course, devoted to films from Canada, with a film called The Ernie Game, which I think is like a really incredible character study. It feels sort of like a Canadian version of Taxi Driver, not as, outwardly violent or anything, but I think it has that kind of like antisocial element to it. So I think that's a really exciting release. It's got a ton of short films on it. In that same month, we launched Deaf Crocodile with Unknown Man of Shandagore, which is just an awesome discovery. The kind of thing that, I love home video for, is like unearthing these things that like we had never heard of. Like I didn't know anything about that movie. And then
Same.
I saw it and I was like, holy shit, like where has this been hiding? And now it's out, and it like looks beautiful, and you can just buy the disc and it's here. Like I think that's, just so rewarding, just like being in this business and like watching these films kind of go from like practically not existing to now they're just available and anyone can buy it. And now it'll be on sale, which is even better. So, if like you're on the fence about, trying out some of these films or like starting to collect certain labels, I think the sale is a great time to do that. And then that same month, we started up with Culture Shock, doing a lot more kind of, like unknown genre films or genre films that hadn't really been given their due. And their first release with us was Girlfriend from Hell, which is just like a super fun movie. It lives up to its title. Like, it's exactly what you want from a movie titled Girlfriend from Hell. So that's one that's been selling really well. And yeah, that one will probably could sell out during the sale. So I feel like that's, one that people might want to target picking up. But nice. Yeah, those are all the labels that kind of came on and will be on sale for the first time. So I really wanted to highlight all of them to make sure that, they kind of get the attention they deserve for being new. And anybody who hasn't wanted to start, collecting every new label, as they come out, the sale's a great time to start that up so that, you can start doing so at a lower price.
Yeah, no, this is great. Like that's a perfect sort of encapsulation of the new stuff. And yeah, I love this. This is wonderful. And so then I guess just talk briefly. People know what Partner Month is because obviously we had it in December. June's going to be all Partner Month. Do you want to just talk briefly about like what that is and why it's exciting for folks?
Yeah, so we'll start that on June 3rd. So, the sale goes through May 30th, and then we'll shut down the site for a few days. Then on June 3rd at at noon, we'll do our usual kind of like all the releases are up for that month, which will just be partner releases. So there'll be no Vinegar Syndrome, releases for June, and the site will just have the partner label releases. So we've got 13 new partner label releases for June 3rd,
Wow.
which is quite a few. So don't spend all of your money during the sale. So yeah, we'll have 13 new releases. One of those is a box set.
Oh,
One of those is UHD. Two of the releases are exclusive to the Vinegar Syndrome site and quite limited. So highly recommend that people don't wait. There will be some stuff on the site that will not exist anywhere else. Will never be repressed again. Like that is it. There's going to be two releases that are like that they will just not show up anywhere else, and that's it. So
wow.
and they're both like exciting releases. And then the box set's awesome. The UHD is great, and then after those four, you still have 9 more releases. It's an absolutely packed month. In addition to all of that, we have like a dozen merch items. So it's going to be a pretty stacked June 3rd. So you've got the halfway to Black Friday sale on May 27th, which is kind of an onslaught of stuff. On June 3rd, you've got a whole other batch, and it's great. It's not like the halfway sale where you only have a few days. The partners only month will actually go for the whole month. So that stuff will all be on sale through the month of June. You don't have to necessarily rush to get stuff, but the things that are limited, and there's only so many of them. So I would recommend that people kind of sign on at least on day one, see what the landscape looks like, see if you want to get anything more sooner than later. But yeah, I think it's a pretty amazing lineup for June.
Fantastic. No, that's great. And the sale runs from the 27th through which day? Is it the Monday?
It goes Friday at midnight to Monday at like 11:59. So it's
Awesome.
through that whole weekend, the long weekend, because it's Memorial Day weekend.
That's great. No, this is going to be wonderful. Yeah, thank you again, Justin, for coming on, for talking about all your picks and highlighting those partner labels, because I do feel like there's a lot of them. Decanalog in particular for me is a newer thing for me, and I want to recommend. I just interviewed Elijah Drenner from Decanalog over the weekend, and so I'll leave a link to that in the notes below. But definitely check. To keep an eye out just blew me away. Like that just was so funny and so surreal and so Buñuel, and I loved it. And I do recommend you look at the interview I did with Elijah, because he talks about the label as a whole. He talks about the movie Detention, which is another one that I think a lot of Vinegar Syndrome folks would dig, and so that, but like you say, there's all these new labels. You've got the Deaf Crocodiles, you've got the Canadian International Pictures, and so much exciting stuff happening. It's really hard to get a handle on it all. So I'm so glad to have you come on and kind of give us a rundown from your point of view, which is the expert point of view, and give people a sense like, look, this is what's happening here, and you got to check this stuff out. So thank you again so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if people want to keep on top of the partner stuff can be a lot. So if people want to keep on top of it, there is an Instagram page for it, OCN Distro. Same thing on Twitter. So OCN Distribution is like the company that kind of oversees all the partner label stuff. So it's on the Vinegar Syndrome website, but OCN Distribution is the one doing it. So if you follow the Vinegar channels only, you're not going to see all the partner label stuff. Follow the OCN Distro channels. That way you can see like what's new, what's coming. Get teases of new stuff and interact. I run those channels, so you can interact with me, ask me questions. See whatever you need to know. It's all there within reach. So
yeah, and they should obviously be following you on socials as well. You do a lot of great stuff, but one of the things I love is that when it's time and when things have been announced, you always post a picture of the stack of stuff, and I'm always like, oh man, look at that stack, that's so good. You know exactly what we like in terms of just like the teas, and so that I recommend always keeping an eye on Justin's feed for those stacks and for other things, because yeah, you always have some good recommendations that are like the kind of things you talked about on this episode. So yeah, definitely follow OCN Distro, definitely follow Justin. And yeah, just keep an eye on the Vinegar Syndrome site in general. Keep an eye on that partner label tab, because there's so much cool stuff there. So anyway, thanks again, Justin. Everybody have a wonderful and Blu-ray filled week, and check out the sale. You know, just take Justin's advice with some of these blind buys, and you know, don't be mad at him if you don't like some of the stuff. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff you recommend. I'm totally intrigued by everything you talked about, so you've got my attention. But yeah, thanks again so much, Justin. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.